1st, 2021. Let's start with the roll call.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? All right, Kathleen Taylor,
Here.
Francine Donchik, absent. Kyle West,
Here.
Larry Chesney,
Here.
Mark Johnson,
Here.
Peter Gower,
Here.
Sarah Chavilacek,
Here.
Scott Carey,
Present.
and Shelley Reed.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Perfect. Next, we'll do the salute to the flag. And where's Chris? Chris, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. Next is approval of the agenda.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Carey.
thank you. Madam Chair, the agenda looks good to me. I'd make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Carey and a second by Commissioner West. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Next, we are going to open it up for public comment. Do we have anybody that wishes to speak?
I've received no public comment.
Okay, we will close public comment and move on to approval of the May 27th minutes. Commissioner Carey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think all 11 pages of those meeting minutes look good. I'd make a motion to approve them as submitted.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chesney will second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Carey and a second by Commissioner Chesney. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next, we will move on to business of the day, the City of Reno Master Plan Amendment Conformance Review. Director Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeremy Smith for the record. I'll read this item into the record. So item 6A is for possible action, a public hearing, City of Reno Master Plan Amendment Conformance Review, Santara Quilisi, that's CR 21-003. Master Plan Amendment from plus or minus 645.98 to 498.26 acres of single family, from 405.87 to 620.22 acres of parks, greenways, and open space, from 15.53 to 9.84 acres of suburban mixed use, from 83.22 to 0 acres of mixed employment, from 13.99 to 25.72 acres of mixed neighborhood, and from 0 to 10.55 acres of public, quasi-public. The overall 1,164.59 acre site is located to the south and east of Interstate 80, southwest of Boomtown Garson Road, to the south of the Meridian 120 South projects, and is designated within the Mortenson-Garson Overlay District and is within the Mortenson-Garson Neighborhood Plan. Today we have Regional Planner Chris Tolley for a presentation with a short follow-up by Michael Pawnee representing Santara Quilisi.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chris Tolley. As introduced, the case before you is for the Santara Quilisi Amendment to the City of Reno Master Plan. That was case CR 21-03. This case was first heard at the May 27th RPC meeting. At that meeting, the RPC, or the first motion for the case, a finding of conformance, failed by a vote of 5-4. The resulting motion passed, which reconsidered and continued the item to this meeting. And I'd go over a little overview. We're going to revisit the original presentation and add some additional pieces based on the discussion and request of the May 27th meeting. So starting off with the original presentation, the Santara Quilisi Amendment to the City of Reno Master Plan proposes a reduction in the amount of single-family neighborhood, suburban mixed use, and mixed employment land uses, while increasing the parks, greenway, and open space, mixed neighborhood, and public, quasi-public land uses. We will show the actual numbers in a couple slides. Regional planning is recommending that the RPC determine that the Santara Quilisi Amendment to the City of Reno Master Plan conforms with the 2019 regional plan. And finally, the regional form map Shown on the right, as you can see, the 1,164.59 acre site is located, as Director Smith introduced, to the south and east of Interstate 80, southwest of Boomtown Garson Road, and is designated within the Mortson-Garson Overlay District and the Mortson-Garson Neighborhood Plan. To move on to some background. So on the right, you'll see the neighborhood map, which zooms into the subject area. The Mortson-Garson development area has a lengthy history, as there have been multiple decisions at both the local and regional level. Ultimately, the end product is the existing Mortson-Garson Neighborhood Plan section of the City of Reno Master Plan, the existing land use and zoning layout, the Mortson-Garson Overlay District, and you will see the existing and proposed acreages on the slide, or in the following slides. The Mortson-Garson Overlay District is composed of 3 planning areas and limits the potential development to 3,000 total dwelling units. The subject site is located in Planning Area 3, which has a development potential of 1,799 units. Within Planning Area 3, the Meridian 120 South development has received tentative approval, and that accounts for approximately 621 units. The remaining 1,178 units could be realized in the subject site, with 1,025 being for single-family dwellings and 153 available for multi-family development and the appropriate land use. And finally, the RPC and RPGB considered and approved conformance review case CR 04-007, which allowed the establishment of the Mortson-Garson Development Handbook, and conformance review case CR 09-018, which was considered and approved by the RPC, which amended the City of Reno Master Plan to include the Western Gateway and Mortson-Garson Neighborhood Plan. To continue on with some additional background, for the Santerre Quilisi proposal at the City of Reno, the Reno Planning Commission recommended approval of the master plan amendment by a vote of 5-1, and the zoning map amendment by a vote of 6-0, and denied the requested tentative map by a vote of 5-1. Subsequently, on March 24th of this year, the Reno City Council approved the Santerre Quilisi amendment to the City of Reno Master Plan. That vote was 5-2, and the requested zoning map amendment and tentative map. For the tentative map, they added and refined the conditions of approval that were considered by the Reno Planning Commission. And a few notes for our purposes, and this is additional information. The development will help fund fire facilities to serve the project, and fire sprinklers are required to be installed in all homes. The developer is required to have additional and approved wildlife mitigation plan, and density within Village 12 near the railroad is limited to 1 dwelling unit per acre. And then to go over the proposed acreage changes, just going to hit the high numbers here. The slide shows the proposed acreages, and the primary changes, again, are the single-family neighborhood being reduced by approximately 147 acres, and the parks, greenways, and open space being increased by approximately 214 acres. And finally, the mixed employment is being removed from the project site or subject site. And then here's how it looks, the existing and proposed land uses. So on your left is the existing, what we have entitled, approved today, and then on the right, which is being proposed. And again, the big components of this proposal are an increase in the parks, greenways, and open space, and reduction in the single-family neighborhood land uses. The reconfiguration of the land uses promotes connectivity of green spaces. And then to move on to the review criteria, this is a typical slide we throw up for the conformance review as policy RC9 of the 2019 regional plan identifies the 5 factors that the RPC must consider when evaluating conformance. These are listed on the slide. And in regards to the 5 factors, staff found that the proposal conforms with each of these policy sections, and we'll provide additional detail on the following slides. So we're going to take a little break from, and as far as the presentation is concerned, from our normal flow, and we're going to discuss regional plan policy applicability. And this is in response to the discussion at the May 27th meeting, and staff appreciates when we dig in deep into subjects of the Regional Planning Commission, we appreciate the ability to dig in with you and learn together when it comes to the wildland-urban interface, and as well as covering this subject with you, which is the regional plan applicability. So with that, generally speaking, the regional plan policies can be applied in two primary ways. The first is during the conformance review of a master plan or affected entity plan, and the second is during the proposed regional plan amendment or during the conformance review of an amendment to a master plan or an affected entity's plan. For the conformance review of a plan, regional planning staff identifies the applicable regional plan policies and reviews the specific documents to determine whether and how the regional plan policies are satisfied by the submitted plan. When we do this type of review, the process typically results in scheduled additions. For the subject conformance review, or for the conformance review of a proposed amendment to a plan such as the subject case, specific policies that apply are identified and the requisite information is shown to demonstrate that the policies exist and the local and affected entity plans and have been adequately considered through the review process. Furthermore, the policy language contained in each regional plan policy provides regional planning staff with the guidance for how the policies should be considered. The regional plan takes a leadership role regarding the Truckee Meadow service area and regional land designations, facilities and services, regional utility corridors and sites, development constraints, as well as spheres of influence, programs of annexation, and joint planning. The regional plan sets specific parameters for local jurisdiction and entity plans and currently maintains or will maintain, like in the case of the NR plan, the data associated to each of these regional plan map layers. Regional plan policies also set targets, or they can set targets, for regionally significant subjects, which can be implemented uniquely by local jurisdiction and entity plans. The conformance review of local jurisdiction and entity plans or amendments thereto considers the scenarios noted previously and determines whether the plan in its entirety or an amendment-specific characteristics conform. Considering that master plan and zoning amendments cannot be conditioned at the regional planning level, we rely on the fact that the existing policies are in place and appropriately influence the decision-making process. While master plan amendments are frequently accompanied by zoning map amendments and tentative maps, these aspects are considered informational materials regarding analysis for regional analysis purposes. Finally, for a project of regional significance, we analyze the entire project for conformance with the goals and policies of the regional plan. And to resume with our typical slide progression, we'll walk through the review criteria or the analysis that staff put in the staff report. So to go over population growth, the proposed amendment will improve the existing land use design, which is expected to include a range of housing types and sizes and densities, while increasing the amount of designated open space in the City of Reno's master plan. The proposal is not anticipated to impact regional form. The subject site is located in Tier 2 and conforms to the specified density requirements. And the overall project has been approved since approximately 2004. And that's through the regional level. Materials submitted by the City of Reno indicate that public facilities and services will be available and adequate to serve the project, as required by policy PF1 of the regional plan. Public facility planning for the Mort's and Garson area has occurred since before the original approval in 2004. Tumwa, or the Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility, will provide sewer service. Tumwa will provide water service. An elementary school site will be provided in the project site. And finally, capacity exists in the current road network. And on to natural resources, the proposed amendment would increase, as noted, the overall amount of parks, greenways, and open space by approximately 214 acres. The change in land use design provides more open land area for mule deer winter range and movement corridors. City of Reno master plan adequately addresses wildland-urban interface concerns through their policies, which were provided in attachment 5 for reference. They collectively satisfy Regional Plan Policy NR7 and NRA. Additionally, and also for reference, the list of conditions for Santerre Quilcé's tentative map include funding for fire service to serve the project, and fire sprinklers are required to be installed in all homes. Finally, the developer is required to have an approved wildlife mitigation plan. And with that, we're going to move on to Director Smith, providing a few comments.
Thank you, Chris. This is Jeremy Smith for the record. I just kind of wanted to sum up, some of the improvements that we're seeing with this change at the master plan designation level. And so let's move from the top down. Right up there, there's a purple square. That's now going to be a dedicated set aside for an elementary school that is going to be required to serve this development. Moving down from that, you can remember on the west side was a purple color, I believe it was purple, and that was the mixed employment. That really actually allowed for industrial uses. There was 3 different industrial zoning categories that were there. And just looking at where that is, it's right in the river corridor. And so, from a source water protection aspect, having a residential down there is probably more appropriate than industrial uses. Over on the far right, the top right there, that pink area is suburban mixed use. That's really been moved closer to the freeway. And so kind of to some degree staying out of the way of that open space and mule deer habitat. And then right below there's a box showing 3 arrows to the corridor. So in all of those areas, the single-family residential blob has been broken up by green space corridors that allow for connectivity and movement of animals. And finally, at the very southern edge of the proposal site there, that's kind of where it gets steep and goes up to the wilderness area. And so generally what's happened is single family that was previous, that currently today is located down there, would be in this, if this is adopted, moved further north and giving kind of more of a buffer to that steep area in the south. And so to kind of visualize that, we actually put together Clerk Damian Kerwin, put together an amazing GIS map slider that allows, Chris can take us through, this is existing, this is what we have today, and this is what's being proposed. And so you can see those corridors emerge, you can see the change in land uses, and how the SMU, the suburban mixed use area, moves over to the northeast. So we'll go back through that again. So it's a generally similar configuration. Major difference, that purple area on the left becoming residential, and also the density of the residential that's allowed there per the conditions of the tentative map, if I'm understanding correctly, has been reduced to 1 dwelling unit per acre. So it would be pretty low density along that western margin. Great, well with that, I think we can wrap up and pass off to the applicant's interested party, Michael Pani, to do a short presentation from the applicant perspective. Come back to the motion once we get through that. Jeremy Smith again for the record. Mike, before you start, we'd like to ask Angela, do you have any words you'd like to say first as the actual applicant?
Good evening. For the record, Angela Foos, Assistant Community Development Director with the City of Reno. So I am here just to answer questions. Just again, kind of the background on this. There's about 20 years worth of history on this property within the Mortensen-Garson Overlay District. And as was mentioned earlier, this was approved as part of a settlement agreement. So it was not something that the applicant came forward and said, this is what I would like. It was something that we said, here's the constraints that you need to develop within. Here's your limit on overall density. Here's your limit on overall land use and zoning. So within that, we worked with the applicant, and we specifically asked them, would you be willing to get rid of that industrial development and put something else in there? And we work with them to say, to put in the residential and also a fairly large park site as well. That's intended to be more of a regional park. So in working with them, it was something we said, what makes sense in this area? Because what made sense maybe 20 years ago when a judge who really doesn't have a whole lot of land use background, came forth with this settlement agreement, we've lived with that. But looking at today's needs and what the community wants, The Verdi community was not generally in support of industrial development. That was something they said that they would be okay if that industrial development went away. So I think it's important for you guys to understand that. Again, there's a lot of history on this, over 20 years worth, and more so more specifically in the last probably year and a half, that we have been working with the developer to try and come up with something that makes sense for the region. And in terms of our needs for right now with housing, we also looked at, where schools are needed and where fire stations are needed and how we as the city of Reno are going to fund putting in that infrastructure, not so much the schools, but definitely the fire infrastructure, the storm drain infrastructure, and the sewer and road infrastructure. So a lot has gone into this, and I will turn it over to Mr. Pani, but if you have specific questions in terms of City of Reno, I'm more than happy to answer those questions and provide you with some more background information.
Good evening, Michael Pani, McDonald Corona on behalf of Toll Brothers. First, I have to apologize for all the technical issues I had at the last meeting. Nobody is happier to be in person than I am tonight. Staff did a good job with the overview of the project, so given some of the questions, I just want to briefly highlight some other elements for your consideration. As he indicated, it's a master plan amendment. We're reducing the single-family use, eliminating the mixed employment, and substantially increasing the parks and open space. Again, point of emphasis, this is not a new proposal for entitlements coming forward to you for the very first time. This is a project, the property that's had entitlements for nearly 17 years. And the policy decisions to develop this property were made both at the local and regional level 17 years ago. As Angela indicated, the MGOD, it's more than just a zoning district for those of you who aren't from the city of Reno. It prescribes special, detailed, and specific standards for development in this unique area to ensure compliance both with the master plan and the regional plan. Under that MGOD, these master plan or the zoning designations kind of operate like a PUD. There's flexibility. You can move them within the site. That gets designated at the tentative map stage. But the importance is all of these different uses are entitled anywhere on the site under the MGOD. It's also important to recognize that currently, as we stand today, we have 755 acres that are entitled for development of residential, commercial, and industrial uses on this site. All of those uses conform with your regional plan. So the question isn't so much, is new development appropriate? It's whether the changes we're proposing to those uses conform with your regional plan. So how do we come about figuring out where these new zoning designations would occur? As Angela indicated, we worked very closely with the city of Reno. We worked very closely with the Verdi residents. But we also did a comprehensive site analysis up front. We identified what are the major topographic constraints? What are the geologic conditions? What are the soils conditions? Where's the hydrology? Where are the major drainage ways? Where are the plant and animal habitats? We did a tree survey. What are the view sheds corridors look like? What are the hillside conditions, the slopes that we're restricted by? The result of all of this was what we call a developable area map, which identified those areas that were best suited for the development as evidenced by all of those technical studies. Taking this input, we were able to then develop this site, which resulted in an improved configuration, creating a better project which is responsive to the community's needs, but was also able to avoid development in those constrained areas and limit it to that area that is most appropriate for development. And the conclusion that you heard is that we ended up substantially increasing the open space as a result. We reduced the number of acres that are being developed. We've protected wildlife corridors. We've created buffers to those WUI areas, and we've preserved the natural resources on the site. As staff indicated, the master plan seeks essentially two things to increase the open space by over 214 acres. We're going to hard zone nearly 700 acres, 62% of the site as open space, all while eliminating that mixed employment industrial use and replacing it with the already authorized single-family use and the 10 acres for the school site, which is mandated by MGOD, that we have a 10-acre school site on this property. These uses end up being better configured to protect and preserve the natural resources and wildlife corridors and are more closely aligned with the Reno's master plan and your regional plan. Some background for some of the Reno Planning Commission members. Following the Reno Planning Commission hearing, We engaged extensively with staff, regulatory agencies, and the neighbors to further enhance and improve the project. Some of those enhancement includes the wildlife mitigation. As we indicated, the project is configured to create these extensive corridors. But following Planning Commission, we met extensively with NDOW, and we developed a draft wildlife mitigation plan, which includes fire prevention programs, noxious weed treatment programs, fence design standards, public outreach and education, adaptive management programs, over $600,000 of compensatory mitigation. City of Reno also imposed on the project a new condition number 13, which specifically relates to additional wildlife management provisions that we had to incorporate. The project includes a number of open space and trails, which will be maintained by the association, but these provide regional benefits in terms of a robust pedestrian network, speaking to some of your WUI concerns, trailhead access to the Forest Service and connectivity to Forest Service lands, as well as the Tahoe Pyramid Bikeway. And Angela mentioned the regional park. Additional enhancements on the fire side, we're required to contribute to the construction of a new fire station at the project entrance. We have specific conditions requiring a WUI wildfire vegetation management plan that includes conditions for defensible space around all of the homes, specific limitations and constrictions on what types of vegetation we can use, and specific home design criteria. Secondary fire access is being required, and the MGOT itself imposes strict design elements that help reduce wildfire, the risk of wildfire given the WUI location of the project. Following the Planning Commission, the city imposed additional requirements on us through specific conditions. So we are now specifically required to sprinkle all homes with fire sprinklers. We're also required to construct a temporary residential fire and EMS station so that this is in place until such time as that permanent station gets completed. There will be an on-site fire response. We were also required to accelerate the completion of that secondary fire access road. Now has to be done before the very first C of O so that it's in place. Quickly on traffic, the project meets or exceeds all service level requirements at all intersections and roadways. You can see they're all going to operate at levels of service A or B, with one exception that will continue to operate at level of service C. And there's a number of regional roadway improvements that are being constructed as required by NDOT. Those level of service requirements will be verified by the city, RTC, and NDOT prior to each final map. And finally, the city imposed additional public safety enhancements on the project. Village 12, which is that area that used to be industrial, the city went a step further and has restricted our development there to 1 unit per acre, limiting another 200 homes. And then they required us to donate $150,000 to the city for public safety improvements to the local Verdi streets. In May, you guys had a number of questions about how does this comport with your policy NR8. That policy states that master plans must include, quote, management strategies for WUI areas such as maximizing open space to protect wildlife, wildlife resiliency strategies, and wildfire risk mapping. We would submit that Reno's master plan currently conforms with this policy, as indicated by staff and in your staff report. Reno Policy 6.2C requires WUI fire management strategies, including the adoption of state fire marshal standards. Their policy GP 7 and 7.3 have strategies for open space preservation, public lands access, wildlands interface, corridor buffers, and other management strategies. None of these conforming policies are being touched by our amendment. The Mortenson-Garson Neighborhood Plan also has conforming strategies, including specific hillside development standards, the parks and trails and open space preservation standards, fire safety standards, wildlife corridor preservation. Again, none of these conforming policies are being modified today. What you do see through the City of Reno specific conditions, even though they're not really before you today, is an implementation of those strategies and an implementation of those policies through our wildlife mitigation plan, our fire stations, and all the fire conditions. Staff spoke to you about the conformance review findings, so I'm not going to go through those again, but we agree with their conclusion that we believe those findings can be made. In conclusion, the amendment that we seek today really seeks to simply reduce the single-family and mixed employment development, to increase open space, and to better refine the already conforming development areas commensurate with the natural features, topographic site constraints, and the desired land use patterns. We would submit that if development of 755 acres of single-family and commercial industrial development currently conforms with your regional plan, then the development of fewer entitled uses on 214 fewer acres, better aligned to be occurring in more appropriate locations, would conform. Additionally, as we said, we would note that with respect to Policy 8, if the WUI management strategies currently in the city's master plan conform and we're not changing those policies, then the proposed amendment would conform as well. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to present a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Pogny. Before we get into questions, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing and do that first. So do we have anybody that wishes to comment from the public?
I've received no public comment requests for this item.
Perfect. Okay, then we will close the public hearing and move on to questions. Any questions for staff or any of the representative from Quillisi or Angela? Commissioner Carey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Raising my real hand is still learning it from transitioning from the digital hand. I had a question maybe for the City of Reno staff. I was curious about the, I guess it's Village 12, the ME that's on the west side of the project. The applicant's letter to us kind of talked about how that land use was controversial in the area, and you were kind of alluding to that folks didn't really want it. I was just kind of curious from the city's land use plan in this area, won't future residents in this area need a place to work?
Jobs housing balance is always something we look at. Because this had an industrial designation, typically, I should say zoning, it had the mixed employment master plan, but typically with that type of land use, it doesn't generate a lot of jobs or high-paying jobs. We did still want to see a mix of not just residential, but some commercial. We really envisioned more of a neighborhood commercial type of area, so we didn't want to see, again, hundreds of acres for a shopping center or, really a high use type of commercial. We said, well, what makes sense here? This also is a gateway into the city of Reno, and we said, does it make sense when you drive into Reno or leave Reno to have this beautiful river and then a bunch of warehouses? And that is something that we wanted to get away from as well. So kind of taking all that into consideration, single family made a lot more sense to us than what potentially could be a bunch of industrial or big box retail that wouldn't necessarily even employ enough people that would be living here.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Concerns? Oh, Commissioner Gower.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Angela, since you're there, it was referenced during the presentation, the City of Reno potentially having some wildfire hazard or risk mapping. Is that something that the City of Reno has and includes, is included in the master plan?
We do have some maps, and I could put some on the projector if we want to see maybe more specifically what that looks like. In general, there's a couple different variations. Washoe County keeps a map of what they call kind of low, medium, and high hazardous areas. The majority of this area is considered a high risk. So that is, again, more of something that when you're in a high-risk area, you have additional regulations that we would condition and things that we look at. We work with the state fire marshal as well. They have some additional requirements, so we made sure that that was part of the conditions of approval that were tied with the project itself.
Okay, so the City of Reno defers to the Washoe County mapping.
We would refer to the state, actually, on that topic. And then if you wanted to pull up any kind of maps, we don't have anything online that's available to the public. Washoe County does, but our individual fire department also maps. So they look at if, again, a property is within the low, medium, or high fire risk. And then we look at how those areas are evacuated. So we look at, not just existing roads, but where in an emergency situation, vehicles would be able to get in and out of that area. So we have all of that mapped. I do have a copy of that map. If anyone wants to see it, we can put it on the overhead. But that's not a public map that we have anywhere on our website.
I guess as a follow-up question for regional staff, is that something that regional planning anticipates acquiring, number one, and using in the future, potentially as part of this natural resources plan, so that information would be available as part of the analysis and decision-making process for something like this?
Yeah, Jeremy Smith, Regional Planning for the Record. Absolutely. We want to get that data and information compiled and centralized and available for our partners to use and have quick access to, as well as in our analyses. And in fact, we didn't put it in part of the, we're a little half-baked on getting that natural resources stuff together, right? We're in process. But we did look at the state's data, and we did actually geo-reference and overlay it and take a look as part of our analysis. And in fact, some of the most, like those two little spots down in the southwest there, that area had a very red concentration on the state's raster map for sort of critical fire risk. And so the fact that the homes were removed from that area jived really well with the whole concept. So we did take a look. There is still some areas that are yellow that are over top in that state map, redder, higher risk areas. But most of it is actually to the south when you get into the really forested zones.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Chair Reed,
Yes. Commissioner
not so much a
Spillichek.
question, but just appreciation to regional staff for taking the extra effort and the extra staff, and to the representatives for taking the extra time to bring this further into, because if it isn't in there, it's not in there. So I really do appreciate that.
Other questions or comments?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Gower.
I just want to echo what Commissioner Tvelicek just said. I think it is really important, particularly, in these developments. And I know we're just looking at a master plan amendment here, but, when we're looking at any sort of decision that is in an area that is identified as a high-risk area for wildfire, that we take a step back, we look at the data that we have, and we make really calculated decisions. Because, quite frankly, through our decisions, we're, potentially putting people at risk. So that was really my fundamental concern back on the 27th is, is this the right decision? Noting that risk. And we know it's there, and I really appreciate staff doing that deeper dive, like you said, Chris. I think that was really important. I appreciate Mr. Ponye and his letter and the information that you provided in your presentation. I thought it was really informative, and it really addressed a lot of the concerns that I had back on the 27th. And I just feel like we have a lot more information that's available. As the next step, I guess, to that, I'm really looking forward to the additional information that we're going to have as part of this natural resources plan and the additional data to be able to make even more informed decisions. The type of map, Jeremy, that you're talking about, where we can actually see those risk areas overlaid with this map, I think that's critical information for making informed decisions. Having said that, I recognize all the background of this, amendment that we're looking at in kind of our constrained decision-making. So I appreciate the discussion regarding that too. So thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to put that on the record. So I know I had a lot of concerns at the last meeting.
Perfect. Thank you, Commissioner Gower. Anything else?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, I just want to, I'll echo that, but I also want to tell Angela, I'm looking forward to seeing sliders of all of our land use changes moving forward. Damien, you're going to be busy, but I think now that Pandora's box has been opened, I just want to, do that. So
Yeah,
thank you.
that was pretty cool. Let's see that again.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
In fact, we're going to work on our portrayal of all this information. We realize our approach to staff reports and the agendas and the packet is a little antiquated. And I think, ideally, we'll be able to get the slider-type info to you in advance of the meeting, so you have time to mess around with it and really check those changes.
Anything else? I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Chesney.
Commissioner Chesney. I move to find that the Centerra Quilisi Amendment to the City of Reno's master plan is in conformance with the 2019 regional plan based on the findings listed in the staff report.
Thank you. Since this is a supermajority vote, can we go ahead and do a roll call vote on this one? We need, 6 to pass? Oh, yeah, sorry, we didn't get the second. Thank you.
I would give a second to this motion.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Chesney, a second by Commissioner West. Any discussion? All right, let's go ahead and call for a roll call vote.
All right, sounds good. Kathleen Taylor?
Yes.
Francine Donchik? Oh, sorry, she's absent. Just testing everyone. Kyle West?
Yes.
Larry Chesney?
Yes.
Mark Johnson?
Yes.
Peter Gower?
Yes.
Sarah Chavilicek?
Yes.
Scott Carey?
Yes.
And Shelley Reed?
Yes. Motion passes with Commissioner Donchek absent. Great, thank you, everybody. Let's move on to item 7, which is reports. We'll start with Director Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeremy Smith for the record. Just a quick report today. So I'm doing it to you again, and I'm sorry. But I'm going to hopefully have asked you to reschedule, potentially, the July 22nd RPC meeting for our reserve date, which is August 2nd. And the reason here is a conflict with the Reno Planning Commission. And so that is also happening on July 22nd. And so it's tough for us to be in 2 places at once. So we would look for, I'll send an email around, I guess, to see if that's a potential. August 2nd is our reserve date, and we do have the Washoe County Chambers reserved for that. If that can't work, then Angela and I will get creative on how we can pull something off on the 22nd. Just wanted to give you a heads up that we will be looking to reschedule to August 2nd. And I wanted to thank you again and appreciate you guys coming tonight and doing this reschedule so that I can serve as the officiant at my sister-in-law's wedding. So thanks, that's all I've got.
All right, thank you, Director Smith. Any member reports? Seeing none, we'll move on to legal counsel reports.
Nothing to report tonight, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any requests for future agenda items? Okay, in a second. Oh, it's on this. There it is. Yeah. Okay, next we'll move on to the last public comment. Do we have anybody?
We have none.
All right, we'll close public comment. Do we have any written correspondence?
We do not have any.
Okay, well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.